60a. We're starting about 6 lines from the top, 7 lines from the top. I'm Rav Yehuda, I'm Shmuel. Rav Yehuda says the name of Shmuel. Rav Yehuda is a student of Shmuel. Chaisel shenifritza b'sulamis. I'm sorry, sheritzpa b'sulamis. A wall that's laid over with ladders. So you can walk over the wall. You can climb over the wall, rather. Afilu b'yasim yaser tersim chitz alav. Even if these ladders are 10 amas, it's still considered a wall. 10 amas wide, that is. So we were discussing this before. What's the status of a ladder by a wall? We said it can have two statuses. It can be a mechitza, it can be a wall, whichever one you want. We were lenient about this. It could be an opening or a wall. Ramalei Rav Bruna Rav Yehuda b'matzarta debei Rav Chanina. Rav Bruna asks Rav Yehuda a question in the press, the olive press of debei Rav Chanina. I'm not sure exactly what was going on there, why the question's taking place there. What you just said is that Shmuel holds that it's considered a mechitza, even though there's a ladder that goes directly over the wall, but that wall is still considered a mechitza. The problem is, Vam Rav Nachman and Shmuel, we quote the statement that we had before. Rav Nachman says the name of Shmuel, Anshe Merpeses, Vanshe Chatzes, Shachel V'Yirvo. You have...
You want to sound?
If you have a porch and you have a courtyard that should have made an Eruv Chatzeres, but they didn't. They forgot to. So, Im yesh lefanad daka arba ina iseres, v'im lav iseres. If there's a little wall, a daka we said was a little wall, it's like 4 tvachim high, sort of like a wall that would use to protect children, sort of. If there's that little wall, so then they say, okay, we're not part of you. And then they don't need to have an Eruv Chatzeres. But if there's no wall, there's no small daka, so then they need an Eruv Chatzeres. Now the question is here, one second. The Merpeses has a ladder. Now, if you say that a ladder doesn't take away the status of a wall, it still is a wall. There's a ladder there, but the wall is still good. So why do I need a daka? Another wall. It already has a wall. It has the wall of the Merpeses. Now, if you don't count the ladder, if you don't count the wall because there's a ladder, then granted you need an extra wall. But Shmuel says that teres mechitza alav. And we have another statement from Shmuel that there's a problem. There's no wall there. It's considered like one rishus, and they didn't make an erev. And we answered this before, the same answer. Well, it wasn't high enough to require a ladder. It wasn't 10 tvachim high. It says, so what does a tiny wall do if it's not high? That wall is not a real mechitza. It's only 4 tvachim. It says, really, there was a wall there. But there was a big gap in the wall. Okay. To remove the gap in the wall, that was enough to have this 4 tvachim mechitza. So there was a wall there. And the daka just changes the status of the gap. Okay. And when our question was regarding the ladder, that was an irrelevant point here because it wasn't even high enough that a ladder should make a difference. Okay. Hanu b'nei kakunai. These people from Kakunai, Dasal Kamidar of Yosef, they came in front of Rav Ramalei. They tell Rav Yosef, Havlan Gavad the Liarv Lan Masan. Give us someone that can make an Erev for our city. Amalei La Abaya, so Rav Yosef says to the student Abaya, Zil Araflu, go make an Erev for them. Make sure that they don't scream about it in the base medrash. Don't do anything wild. Don't make big mistakes. Don't make a commotion about it. Try to do it as kosher as possible. Also, he goes, there's some houses that are open to the river. Beach houses. Maybe I don't know, cabanas they would have. And these houses that are there by the water. Amar, he says, Hana Levi Shir Lamas. Okay. We were learning in the Mishnah that if it's a large city, a city that has 600,000, you can't make an Eruv in the whole city. You need to have a one spot where there's no Eruv. You should remember Teiras Eiruvin. You should know that it's not just you're allowed to carry on Shabbos, and there should be one section where you always remember that you're not allowed to carry. So you should be avoiding a Rosh Hashanah. So in this city there where Abaya is making it, Kakunai, so he sees this group of houses. So it's facing the wrong way. There's a wall that's blocking it. It's not part of the Eruv anyway. So he says, okay, that will be the shear. That will be, shear means what's left over that's not part of the, that's not part of the Eruv. It wasn't part of the Eruv anyway. He says, this will be what's not part of the Eruv. Hadar Amar, but then Abaya says, one second, Ein Ma'arvin Eskulatanan, it says you're not allowed to make an Eruv through the whole city. Michlal, but that implies, but it should be a part of the city that could have been part of the Eruv. So leaving them out is not really leaving them out. They were left out anyway. The Mishnah that tells me that I'm supposed to leave something out of the Eruv wasn't referring to this, because this was left out even beforehand. This was blocked. This wasn't part of the city. There was a wall between these houses and the rest of the city. Ella Yavadlu Kavi. That's an idea. I'll make windows in the wall. That way, they'll be able to join in with an Eruv Chatzeris. See, if there's any way to get through from one courtyard to the other, then there's an option to make an Eruv Chatzeris between those two courtyards. If there's no opening between two courtyards, then they can't make an Eruv Chatzeris together. If there is an opening, then they can make an Eruv Chatzeris. So here there was no opening. So Abaya was leaving this out. This is 1 second. They're left out anyway. They can't join with the Eruv anyway. He says, okay, so I'll make an opening, a window. They should be able to join, and then they won't join. And that will be how they'll be left out of the Eruv. Hadar Amar Loibayit, then he says, actually, I don't need to do that. The Rabba Bar Avua Ma'arvlu L'Kul Mechuza Arsaisa Mishum Pered the Beit Turay. The Kol Chad V'Chad V'Shir L'Chavri. If you look in the picture in Rashi, we had this once before. Apparently, in the city of Mechuza, there were different neighborhoods, and the neighborhoods were blocked by piles of date pits that the animals would eat. Now, Rabba Bar Avua made an Eruv for Mechuza by each neighborhood separately, and officially he should have left something out. So Abaya is saying, you know what, he really didn't leave anything out. What he did was, because he made each neighborhood a separate Eruv, which was blocked by these big pits and that had piles of this animal food, these date pits, piles or pits in the ground maybe. So each neighborhood left out the other neighborhood. Now they couldn't have made an Eruv together anyway, but that's Abaya's proof. That's what Abaya wants to say. Even though they couldn't have made an Eruv together because they were separated, but it was enough for Rabba Bar Avua to say that I didn't make an Eruv in the whole city as one, and each one was left out from the other Eruv, and that's good enough. So here also, when he leaves out those beach houses, even though they can't make an Eruv together, but it's considered that he left them out. Then Abaya thinks again, he says it can't, it's not a good comparison. Because we have to have been there to know the situation, but apparently the rooftops were close enough that they could have gone from one to another, and they could have made an Eruv because there is access from one neighborhood to the other over the roofs.
Is this Abaye having a debate with himself?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, Abaye is going back and forth in his mind. Like, what do I need to do here? He's on Shlichus from Rabbi Yosef to make an Eruv, and there's no one to ask, and he's like trying to figure this out. So he says, Bahani le'ma'arvi, hilkach le'navden kavi. So therefore I have to make these windows, because over there in Mechuzah, they were able to make an Eruv because they had access to do the roofs. Hadar amar kavi nami le'boy. I don't need to do the windows either. He's telling himself. Dahu beitivna davle lamar bar pizza bin pumpadisa. There was this beitivna. Shav Yeshila Pumpadisa. Sounds like a storage area that Mar Bapradisa had from Pumpadisa, and he had this storage area, and that was considered the shear, what was left out, not part of the Eruv for Pumpadisa. So therefore, he's saying that I don't have to make the windows, because even though this area wouldn't have been part of the Eruv anyway, it seems like it's okay from that story that took place in Pumpadisa. It's not giving us the details of what happened over there. So Amar, this is what Rabbi Yosef meant. Make sure that they don't scream about this in the Beis Medrash. He said apparently this is very complicated. It was good, as he knew what he was saying when he warned me, that make sure you don't do anything surprising, because this is very complicated. It was going back and forth in his mind. What do I need to do? So this is what he was referring to. Okay. How did we get into this? Maybe because we're looking at areas and asking if it's considered a wall or it's not considered a wall. So now we came here, probably more directly. We're talking about leaving something out. You have to make a shear. So that's how it came in from the Mishnah. Okay, unless you leave out from the city an area of 50 dwellers, like Ir Chadasha. That was the name of a city. Tanya Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Ir Haisib Yehuda, Chadasha Shema. There was a city in Yehuda, its name was Chadasha. They had 50 dwellers. And this is what the sages used to measure the Yisashir, and that was considered left out. Gemara asks, what about Chadasha itself? Can you make an Eruv in Chadasha? It's left out of the city Eruv. But can this small community, Ir Chadasha, could they make their own Eruv? The Gemara says, Chadasha, ki heichadiyo havishir l'gdei l'ktana. There's no problem making an Eruv there. The whole problem is making an Eruv together. So the same way that the city of Chadasha is left out from the general Eruv, so the city of Chadasha has its own Eruv, which leaves out the general Eruv. So the big city was left out of the Chadasha city. It's perfectly fine. Gemara says, we're not talking about that Chadasha is part of a larger city. We're talking about Chadasha on its own. Rav Huna Rav Yehuda, Chadam or Boyishir v'Chadam alei Boyishir. We're asking about, does a small city that only has 50 dwellers, does that also need to leave an area out? It's an interesting Gemara, because we only learned that a large city needed to do that. So why is the Gemara asking about a small city? So it could be that what the Gemara means, I'm not sure, it could be what the Gemara means is that this is a small city in the people that dwell there. But it's not saying how many people are entering in because of a marketplace and all of that. It could be that there's a lot of traffic through the city, which makes it into considered an Ir Shel Rabim, even though it's a small actual city. But maybe because of that, you would also have to leave out.
Is the small city a reference to the number of people or the size of the
It has to do with the number of people.
So it could be that could be that Chadasha was simply
a large area.
Yeah.
Right. Reb Shimon Aimer Gimel Chatzeres. Reb Shimon argued on this. He said that when you make a city Eruv and you have to leave out, you don't need to leave out 50 dwellers. You only need to leave out, let's say, 3 courtyards of 2 houses each. Six people. Amar Rav Chama Bar Guria Amar Rav Halacha Reb Shimon. Chama Bar Guria says the name of Rav. Rav, first generation Amira in Bavel. He passed like Reb Shimon. Rabbi Yitzchak says, oh, even less than Reb Shimon. You only need to leave out 1 house, 1 courtyard. Umar says 1 courtyard. A courtyard without a house is considered like you left out. You didn't leave anyone out. It's just an empty courtyard. No, it doesn't mean 1 house or 1 courtyard. It means 1 house in 1 courtyard. That means you only have to leave out 1 house. Abai asks Rabbi Yosef, this halacha that Rabbi Yitzchak said, is that his own understanding or is that a teaching that he had? What's the difference? When you learn, is it just a song? That means like everything matters. Anyway, we had that before. It's where did we have that before? It says over here we had it in Shabbos. Okay. There's a person that's on the east and he tells his son, make an Eruv for me on the west. Or the person's on the west. He says, make an Eruv for me on the east. Now, an Eruv over here is referring to some food that's being placed somewhere within 2,000 amas of the person's location. And that way on Shabbos or Yom Tov, he'll be able to walk not 2,000 amas from his location right now, but 2,000 amas from where that food was bein hashmashes. So here's our issue. He has from himself to his house is 2,000 amas. That means even without the Eruv, he has access to his house. He didn't say he was at home, right? So he's out of his house, but he has access to his house because he's within the walking limits. However, he doesn't have access to his Eruv. It's too far away from where he is. So mutal lebesa, he's allowed to go to his house, but he can't go to the Eruv. It's too far away. Now, the Gemara is going to explain, Rashi explains now, that mutal lebesa doesn't actually mean that he's allowed to go to his house. And va'asal eruv doesn't actually mean he's also to go to his Eruv. Mutal lebesa means that his Eruv, his shvisa, let's use that word, his residence is his house and not his Eruv. Now, in other words, his Eruv didn't work because it's too far away. So mutar lebesai, his permissibility is the permissibility of someone that would be residing in his house. Now, Rashi says, 1 second, we said before that if someone places an Eruv and it doesn't work and it's invalid, he doesn't have some other Eruv that takes effect. Even his own location doesn't take effect because he didn't want to be here and he sent an Eruv and that didn't work. So we said, we gave things that he only has Dalet Amos. We gave he's stuck in this spot. What does he do? Right? Even how to use the bathroom was a discussion. And here you're telling me his Eruv didn't work and he has his house 2,000 amos in every direction. So Rashi explains that when did we say that if an Eruv doesn't work, the guy's stuck when 4 amos? That's only if he doesn't have access to his house. Traveling on the road. But if someone tries to make an Eruv and it doesn't work, so the default Eruv comes into place, and that's his house. So if there's if he has access to his house, then that becomes his Eruv automatically. Okay, now let's say le'iruvai alpayim amma alabesi yasimikan. Let's say the way the Eruv was placed, he has access to his Eruv, but he doesn't have access to his house. So also lebesai. So his location is not his house. And his location is his Eruv. It seems obvious. Let's say someone puts his Eruv. He wants to put it outside the city or wherever. So he put it outside the city, but he put it within the 70 amas that surrounds the city. So that's not even an Eruv. That's nothing. He anyways could walk the city. He didn't do anything there. He always had access to the whole city. Over here, the Gemara is going to explain that it doesn't mean chutz l'tchum, because that's impossible. It means chutz li'ibur shalir. He puts it outside the city limit. The tchum, not the tchum, the 2,000 amas. He puts it outside the 70 amas of the city. So then, mashiniskar mafsid. You put it 1 amma out, you lose 1 amma on the other side. Okay. Because al-kadaita, Gemara's not discussing the Mishnah. We understood when it says that the person's on the east and he tells his son to make an Eruv for him on the west. East of what? So it says, we understood, because al-kadaita had entered your mind, to say that Lemizrach is a Mizrach Beisei. He's in the east of his house. L'mayrav, when the Mishnah gives us that scenario, he's on the west. That means the L'mayrav Beisei is on the west of his house. Okay, now let's explain further in the Mishnah and see how this works. Bishleim, we're going to try it. Okay, one of the scenarios was that to him, to his house was 2,000 amas, but to his Eruv was further. Okay, he was on the east of his house. He sends his son to make an Eruv on the west of his house. So he's closer to his house than his Eruv. Easy. He's able to reach. Mati means to reach. He's able to reach his house, but he's not able to reach his Eruv. Easy. But how do you do it the other way? He said he's to the east of his house. He sends his Eruv to the west of his house. He's able to reach his Eruv, but he's not able to reach his house. Very complicated. How can he reach his Eruv? This is like a Columbus issue. How does he reach his Eruv, which is to the west of his house, easier than to his house? He's on the east of his house. He can reach his Eruv, but he can't reach his house. How does that work? It's impossible. Maybe on the North Pole, that's like, you can confuse yourself like that. Actually, we'll see. The Gemara is actually going to give one of those answers. So the Gemara explains like this. The whole question was only based on the translation of to the east, and we set it up that he's to the east of his house. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak explains, Mi sarvus lemizrach lemizrach beisei lemarav marav beisei. He translated east meant to the east of his house, and west meant to the west of his house. So that's why you have this problem. No, that's not what it means. Lemizrach is lemizrach benai. It's all self-referencing. It's not to the east of his house. He's just on the east side, and his son is on the west. Where his house is, we're not saying. We're not saying he's to the east of his house. He's on the east of his son. His son is on the west. He sends him, go that way to make an Eruv. Now, the Eruv was closer than the house. We never mentioned where the house is. We didn't say even in which direction. There was no, okay. Okay, that's one answer. Rava bar Rav Shila Rafil Tim Mizrach Beisel Marav Beisel in the Koi Beisel Balachseina. Talking about that the house is on an angle. Okay, take a look at the Rashi. See, he's to the east of his house. See, there's a picture there. He's to the east of his house. He's more than 2,000 amas from his house. But he's closer to his Eruv. They're both on the east. He's to the east of his house. They're both on the east. But his Eruv is in a straight line to the east. And his house is northeast, let's say. So he can't reach his house, but he can reach his Eruv. Okay, if someone puts his Eruv in the Ibor, etc. This etc. is very important because the Gemara is not discussing if he puts the Eruv in the Ibor. The Gemara is discussing if he puts his Eruv chutz l'tchum. The Gemara says chutz l'tchum sal kedaitach. What are you telling me? He puts it chutz l'tchum. He gains the amma on one side, he loses the amma on the other side. Is that possible? It's out of the tchum. He doesn't get anything. It doesn't mean out of the tchum. We learned this when we learned the Mishnah. It means outside of the city limits of 70, the extra area of 70 amas that a person that makes an Eruv gets outside the city. Okay, this Gemara here is going to tell us something very important. We have to wait 60 daf in Eiruvin to get to this. That's the difficulty of learning Gemara, which is different than when you learn Rambam. The Rambam sort of sets you up with the basic, fundamental, elementary things that you need to understand the details. The Gemara doesn't always do that. The Gemara can start you off with the nitty-gritty and then it gives you the fundamentals later. If someone makes an Eruv, let's say like this, someone's in a city. So he wants to walk outside the city, maybe to the next city or whatever. So he starts counting the 2,000 amas from outside his city, not from his house. We're exactly outside the city, whatever. From outside the city, he starts counting. Let's say the next city that he reaches, the edge of the city, is 1,900 amas. So he walks into the city, only 100 amas, and he has to stop there. Can't make it through the whole city. But let's say he walks, the other city is not 1,900 amas. The other city is 1,000 amas away. And the whole city is only 500 amas. So he could, there's different opinions, but it's possible. Here, what we're going to learn is that he's able to walk not 500 amas past the second city. He's able to walk 1,000 amas past the second city. Because the whole city that's absorbed in the Eruv is going to be like 4 amas. Just like we said, by his house, he doesn't start from his house. He starts from outside the city. So when he reaches a city, it's sort of like, like on Chutes and Ladders, you can like skip. He has to skip the city and start again from the, sorry for that example. He has to start from the new, the edge of the city. Okay, we'll see what's going on over here. So first we said right now, Mashiniskaru mafsid. What he gains on one edge, he loses at the other. Mashiniskar v'sulai. That's the only thing that happens. That he gains 1 amma. Even if he puts it one amma out of the city, he loses the whole city. If your Eruv isn't in the city, then when you walk to the city, like we said, you have to stop. You have to stop at let's say that the city, the size of the city is 2,002 amas, right? When he's in the city, then he can walk 2,000 amas outside the city from any side. If he puts an Eruv, one Amma outside the city to the east, then when the person walks to the city, he has to stop at the edge of the city, at the last Amma. He can't even walk past to the outside of the city. It's 2,002 Ammas. He can only make it into the city to 2,000 Ammas. The city is 2,002 Ammas. Stuck. So it's not that he loses an Amma. He loses a whole city. There's one more factor here that we're not taking into account. It's not that he loses an Amma. He loses an Amma in a whole city, which could be 2,000 Ammas or more. The Gemara explains like this, like Kasha. Yeah, you're right. However, it's not a question on the Mishnah. Because Kancha calls midasa b'chatzir, Kancha calls midasa b'seifir. It depends if the size of the city gets absorbed into the tchum. If the entire city gets absorbed into the tchum, then you don't count that city. It's like the chutes and ladders. You get to skip past the city. But if it doesn't get absorbed entirely within the 2,000 Ammas, then wherever you end, that's where it is. This is what the surprise is. We had to wait to learn this. Well, it was mentioned before once, Daf. But here we have it clear. If the person is measuring in his 2,000 Ammas and in halfway through the city, he can only walk till half the city. Can't go further. But let's say his 2,000 Ammas and at the end of the city, then then the whole city becomes 4 Ammas, and he can walk at the other edge of the city, whatever rest of the 2,000 Ammas he had remaining. So you don't count the city. Very important little piece of Gemara. Copy this and paste this to the front page. Okay.
That's when the far end of the city is now referring to. From
yeah. Talking about that if the whole city, the city can't be 2,000 Ammas wide, obviously. It has to be somewhere less than 2,000 Ammas. Ravidi. And this doesn't apply if this was the place of your residence. It's only talking about when you're measuring to another. If it's your place of your residence, you always start from outside the city. The city never counts. Talking about when you're walking to another city, that city that you're going to, the object, not the subject, the object city is the one that we have this discussion. Okay. Amar Ravidi. Ein elo divri nevius. Where does he know this from? This is nevius. This is prophecy. There's no source for this. Mali kalsa b'chatzir, mali kalsa b'seifir. What's the difference?
That was the question I was going to ask.
Where's Yitzi? Any little different obvious. Must have heard it from his teacher. That's what we're saying. Rabbi Shua ben Levi. It's Ravidi in the name of Rabbi Shua ben Levi. Right? Now Ravidi is surprised about the statement that he gave over in the name of Rabbi Shua ben Levi. Amar Rava says Tavaya Tanani. It's not Nevius. It's all a Mishnah. Mishnah's on the next page. It goes like this. Settlers, residents of a large city, can walk through an entire small city, which is outside their city. Why? Because a small city isn't 2,000 Amos, they can go through the whole city. But residents of a small city can't make it through a large city. Why? Because the 2,000 Amos ends in middle. My time. Because the measurement doesn't make it through. The residents of the small town don't make it through the large town. So they can't make it through the whole city. But the residents of the large town can walk through the whole town because it's absorbed in the 2,000 Amos. Mamash approved to Rabbi Shua ben Levi. What was Ravidi thinking? That's Nevius. Ravidi. What does he say? Anshe Tani. There's a different gersa in that Mishnah. His Mishnah doesn't say Anshi Ir Gedalim Halchas Kol Ktana Ve'ein Anshi Ir Ktana. He says it both ways. Anshi Ir Gedalim Halchas Kol Ir Ktana. Ve'anshi Ir Ktana Halchas Kol Ir Gedayla. Umukun La Benaisin. And he's talking about when someone places his Eruv there. Aval Maidei Leitnan, but he's not talking about someone that's measuring from outside the city. So, in other words, the Mishnah is not a kasha on him. It's just not talking about someone that's putting an Eruv there. As we'll see soon, it's going to be a sorry, we'll see. It's not talking about someone that's measuring, walking out of a city and going from one city to another. Okay. There's a problem like this. We have a Mishnah that says, it's on the bottom of the page, same like the Mishnah we just quoted. The end of it says that when you are measuring, you can only go till the end of your 2,000 amas. Even if the edge is at the entrance to a cave, you can't go into the cave. So you see that it stops exactly where you end. See, that was what the statement of Rabbi Shua ben Levi. That if it doesn't make it through, it stops. And as if the area it isn't absorbed into the 2,000 amas, then you have to stop right there. So it is a Mishnah. What's Ravidi saying? It's Nevi'us. It's a Mishnah. Gemara says, Seifei Tzrich Alei. That's not what Ravidi was referring to, was the Nevi'us. What Ravidi thought was Nevi'us, was prophetic, without a source. That was if the city is absorbed within the 2,000 amas, that you don't count the 2,000 amas. You don't count the city. You just shoot past the city and continue your count from before the city. That's the Nevi'us, and that we don't have a source for. The Leitanan, that it doesn't say in the Mishnah. Rav Nachman. Now Rav Nachman's going to explain the way to read the Mishnah. Man detani anshe lemishtabish, man detani ein anshe lemishtabish. Whichever way you read the Mishnah, it's not a mistake. It's just referring to something else. As it says, man detani like inshi are anshe lemishtabish demukun labenaisim. It says when you're allowed to walk from one to another, you can go through. That's talking about when you placed it there. Mandatani ein anshe lemishtabish demukun lamaida. That's because you're measuring, and as will be explained shortly. We're going to read the Mishnah now. It was missing words, and you read it as follows. People of the big city can walk the whole small city. Well, it's totally absorbed in the tchum. It's no problem. But the people of the small city can't walk through the big city because it's not absorbed in the tchum. That's when you're walking out of your city and you're counting your steps to see if you've passed the 2,000 amas. But let's say it differently. Someone that's in a large city, and he puts his Eruv in the small city, he sends someone over there to put the food. Or if he's in the small city and he puts his Eruv in the big city, then that city doesn't count. The Eruv counts. But the 2,000 amas doesn't start from his Eruv, it starts from outside the city. The city itself does not use up his limit on how much he's allowed to walk. That's what we're learning here. When you place an Eruv in a city, you have that whole city as if that's your residence. Just like when you're there, you start counting from outside the city. So too, if you put an Eruv there, you start counting 2,000 amas from outside the city, not from the Eruv. See, Rabbi Kiva is going to argue on that, but that's the opinion of the sages. Amar Rav Yosef, Amar Rami Bar Abba, Amar Rav Huna. Rav Yosef says the name of Rami Bar Abba, name of Rav Huna. Irshi Yeshevas al Sfas Nachal. A city that's by a Nachal. It's a stream or a valley type. Yesh lefanei Daka Arba Meidlim Sfas Nachal. This is a dangerous area to live. There's a cliff there. If there's a wall that's 4 amos tall, now when it says arba, you have to remove the hay. It also doesn't make sense. Rashi, whatever. We always use the word daka. We said, oh, it's a small wall, 4 tvachim. Over here it says arba. If you remove the hay, then it's amos. Arba amos instead of arba tvachim. So the wall needs to be 4 amos. Now, in order for this to be considered a city, it needs to have that wall. If it doesn't have the wall, then it's considered like people that live in tents. And whenever people live in tents, you measure the tchum from the entrance to their tent, not from the edge of their park. We call it trailer home park, whatever it is. Amalei Abaya. Abaya says to Rabbi Yosef that's saying this over, Daka Arba Allah. You told us that it's Arba Amas. And he asks, Maishna called Daki Dalma the Arba'a. How come whenever we talk about the Daki, these little walls, we said maybe like a wall, like to stop children from walking or something. It was always 4 tvachim. It's like a foot tall. Now you're telling me that it's 4 amos. 4 amos is not a foot. 4 amos is 8 feet, 6 feet, I guess. All of those cases wasn't a dangerous place to use. Over here, it's a dangerous place to use because it's at the edge of a cliff. So only if there's a wall there is it considered an area of residence that is considered like a city. If you don't have the wall, it's not considered a city. It's just like people just happen to be there. It's not considered that you count from the edge of that area. Amrav Yosef, how do I know this? The Tanya is a brisa that says, Hit Rebbe, she b'nei geder yarden lachamson, v'im b'nei chamson eidon l'geder. Rebbe allowed for the people of Geder, if you take a look in the Rashi, this is like a picture of a mountain. You see an incline. On the top is the city of Geder, and on the bottom is the city of Chamson. Now, there's a little line that goes there. That's the Daka. That's a little tiny wall that's there. Okay, there's a wall. Now, Rebbe allows Geder to go down to Chamson, but he doesn't allow Chamson, all of Chamson, to go up to Geder. My timer. Why does it? If they're in the Tchum, then they're in the Tchum. One can walk to the other can't walk to this one. How does that work? If it's 2,000 amos away, they should be able to walk. It says, my time. The answer is because they're at the edge of a cliff. One of them put up a wall, so it's considered a city. So they can walk from the edge of their city, not in their houses. They can walk from the edge of the city 2,000 amos. The other one didn't put up a wall. So they have to count from the edge of their houses. Not everyone can get from the edge of their house 2,000 amos to the other city. Everyone else has the same starting point. But Chamson doesn't have the starting point that Geder has. Kyosar Rabdimi came, Amar, Tafrugi Mitargi, they would attack. Bnei Geder apparently were these violent people, and they would attack the people of Chamson. So Rebbe, my hitter, what does it mean? Rebbe allowed? No, it doesn't mean allowed. It says Hiskin. Rebbe instituted that the people of Chamson should not go together. Chamson, it sounds like someone that's like hot-headed maybe or something. But apparently that's not what we're referring to. The Geder people are the people that are the dangerous people. So Rebbe doesn't want the Chamson to go up together because they're going to get hurt. Maishna Shabbos, why can't they go on Shabbos? But during the week they're allowed to go. What's the difference, Shabbos? Oh, this is so appropriate. Right after Simchas Torah, the Shchicha B'Shichros. Shabbos, they would get more drunk, those people in Geder. They would get violent. drink too much, and they would beat up the people of Khamsin that would come to visit. Kiasli, it's like two groups of Hasidic dynasty that don't get along or something, or other examples. So after Fabrengen, don't go there. You can't go there. So the Gemara says, 1 second. But when Geder comes down to Khamsin, why are they allowed to go down? They're going to beat up the people of Khamsin that when they go to visit Khamsin. Says,
by the way, I'm just now looking this up. There's a place just southeast of the Kinneret called Mavo Hamat, and it's called Gader. They're like very close to each other.
Oh, so interesting.
It's between the Jordan and
Hamas.
Yeah, so I'm just wondering, Bnei Hamas, and then looking here, it's Gader. That's what the place is called.
Wow.
So it could be that there was two little towns right next to each other, and one's Gader. Come on.
Okay.
Literally exactly those words. So
very interesting. The Gemara answers now. Masya kalba blei masya shefshlin leinava. Well, a dog that when he's not in his hometown, he doesn't have the chutzpah to bark. So the people of Geder, when they visit Khamsin, they don't attack. They're more subdued. So Khamsin shouldn't go to Geder, but the people from Geder that come to Khamsin, they're not in their hometown. They're going to be more. So Hashtanami mitatzugi b'nei Khamsin le'Geder. But what about if that's the case, then Khamsin is going to take revenge on them. So it says kuli haile kaifala. Well, they're not that subdued. They're not going to just allow themselves to be beaten up. Okay. Rav Safra Amar Ira Siyik Keshes Habe. Rav Dimi Barchin Amar Anshi Ergedei Levanshi Ketana Habe. Rav Kana Masni Habe. Let me explain what's going on here. He says that the whole story is not a problem. You're telling me that one had a wall, so it's considered a city. The other one didn't have a wall. Then you're telling me that it has to do with if there was beating up each other and there was this rule, don't go there on Shabbat. It says it's very simple. One of them was a large city, one's a small city. Exactly like we learned before. The large city can walk to the small city and make it through the small city, and it's fine. The small city that walks to the large city doesn't make it through the whole city. It's that simple. He makes it more complicated. You know, who's doing that? Rav Safra. Rav Safra makes it more complicated. He says it like this. He says that it's the city was like a bow. How does that work? Well, we said that if you make a city like a bow, like a U, if the city is like a U, then it depends. If from one tip of the U to the other tip of the U, it was more than 4,000 amas, then you didn't count from the string of the bow. You counted from the U. So what we're saying here is that Khamsan, counting from that U, wasn't able to make it up to Geder because it was a small city and Geder was a large city, and they couldn't start from the bow, from the string. They had to start from the bow, and so that was a longer walk, a longer distance. They couldn't get through all the way through Geder, but Geder was able to make it all the way to the edge of Khamsin. It's the same answer as the other answer. It's just more complex because it's telling you about the shape of the city. Rav Tivim Masni Achi, Rav Safra, Rav Dimi, Bar Chinana. Rav Tivim taught it like this: the same people, Rav Safra and Dimi. He just didn't say attribute who said what. People of a small city or people of a city of a bow. Whatever the case is, one was able to walk to the other one all the way through because of its size. The other one wasn't. Now we have a Mishnah. People of a large city can walk the whole small city. Should sound familiar. This is the Mishnah that we've been quoting. Oh, look at that. It doesn't say ve'ein anshe. On the side it has. Manshir Ketana Mahalchanas Koler Gedola. It's supposed to be Beinachi. Ketzad, how is this? Misha Yibir Gedola V'Nasnes Ruv Bir Ketana. It doesn't have to say Beinachi because here now we're talking about not Maidid, we're talking about Hanaisi and Eiruvai. Talking about he lived in the big city. But you put your Erev in the small city, then you can walk the whole small city. Or if you live in the small city, but you put your Erev in the large city, you can walk 2,000 amas outside of either city that you put the Erev. Because you don't count from your Erev, you count from outside the city. Rabbi Kiva says no. Granted, Rabbi Kiva says, if that's your residence, then you start counting from outside the city. But if it's not your residence and you just put an Erev, I don't care if it's a city, you only start counting from your Erev. That's Rabbi Kiva's opinion. If you are actually there, then you start outside the city. But if you're not there and it's just an Erev in the wild or an Erev in the city, you always start counting from the location of the food, not from outside the city. Amalem Rabbi Akiva says to them, don't you agree that if you put your food in a cave, that you only have 2,000 amas from the place of the Erev? The sages said back, that's because that's not a city. People don't live there. But if it is a city, people live there, then the whole area becomes like a free zone, and you only start counting out of that area. Nimtza kal teicha me'al gaba, which means that if people lived in the cave, but they didn't live on top of the cave, and there were two entrances to the cave, let's say, you put the Erev on top of the cave where no one lives, you have to start counting from the center 2,000 amas. But if it's inside, underneath, in the cave, where people are living in there, then you don't start counting from the Erev, you start counting from the edges of the doorways, which gives you a little bit extra space. So kalhu mitaycha me'al kapa. When the sages said, when the sages would agree that when you're actually counting from a location and you're reaching the next location, that you have 2,000 amas, but you can't make it into the cave, you have to stop right there. Because that's when you're counting out. Let's see if we can finish to the end of the paragraph. It would be great. So a few minutes. I'm Rabbi Yehuda Mishmol. Rabbi Yehuda says the name of Shmuel. Shabbos Ber Chareva. Someone is in a city that's destroyed. It means there's no one living in the city, but it is possible to live there. There's no one there. The Rabbanan Mahalach is Kula B'chutz L'Alpayim. According to the Rabbanan, and according to Rabbi Akiva, Rashi points out that the same thing would apply. If you're actually in the city, Rabbi Akiva would agree that you can walk the whole city, and then 2,000 amas starts outside the city. Now, it's true that no one's living there, but you are, and it's potentially able to live there, so it's good enough. That's the opinion of Shmuel. Rabbi Yehuda says the name of Shmuel. But let's say you put your Erev there, no one's living there, you only have 2,000 amas from the place of your Erev. There's no diurim there, even the Rabbanan are Maida. Rabbi Elazar Amar, it's supposed to be Amar Rabbi Elazar, this is Rabbi Elazar ben Pedas, it's not a Tana, it's an Amar. He's arguing on Shmuel. He says, it doesn't matter, if you put the Erev there, it's considered like a city, because there are houses there and it's no problem. Meisvei, the Gemara has a question. Amalem Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva says to the sages, if someone puts his Erev in a cave, don't you agree that you only have 2,000 amas from the Erev? You don't have the whole cave. So Zamrullah, they responded to Rabbi Akiva, that's only if no one's living there. I agree. But if it's a city, then that's not the case. Sounds like if no one is living there, for example, a city where no one's living in, like a Yer Chareva, a destroyed city, Maidulai, they would agree to Rabbi Akiva. It's a kasha. So kasha on Rebbe Lazar. Rebbe Lazar said that if you put an Eruv in the city, it's considered like a city. You start counting from outside. The Chacham agree. If you put it in a cave, it doesn't work. Gemara says, "Ma'ayim b'diurim." What's the pshat when they said it doesn't have people residents there? In a ruya ladira. That's the cave. It's not fit to live in. This is fit to live in. It's fine. It's just quarantine. Something, I don't know. No one's there. But all the houses are there. Everything is perfectly fine. Okay. It's like the hotels now. You can live there. It's just they don't let you in. Whatever. Tashema Shavas Bi'ar Afili Gedayla Kantachi. If someone is in a city that's he settled in a city that's so large, like the city of Antioch, right? It's a very large city. Very large city. One of the large cities of that time. The Ma'ara, in a cave, Afilu Kamar Tzidkiyo Melech Yehuda, a cave even the size of Tzidkiyo, the cave of Tzidkiyo Melech Yehuda, which apparently went from Yerushalayim to Yericha or something, a huge cave. Mahalach es kula v'chus al paimam. You start counting from outside. Okay, let's see what's going on. Katani, we learned Ir Dumya Demara. We had a city and we had a cave. Okay. Mama ara chareva, afir chareva. When you said a cave, it sounds like no one's living there, right? It sounds like a cave. So the city, let's say, would be the same way. So v'shavas in avlini achlai. Look at the brisa. It says if you were in that city, then good. Then you get outside the city. But let's say you weren't in the city. You just put your Eruv there. Then you don't start counting from outside the city. You start counting from your Eruv. Mani, who holds this? That if you put an Eruv in a city that doesn't have people living there right now, that you start counting from Ilay Rabbi Akiva, my area Chareva. Why does it have to be a city that no one's living in? If you put an Eruv, even in a city that's active, so you also start counting from the Eruv. You're not there. You put the Eruv there. You only start counting from the Eruv, not from outside the city. It can't be Rabbi Akiva. Here we're talking about Yer Chareva. Why? How did we get that? Because we compared it to Amara. Elalav Rabbanan must be the opinion of the rabbis. Okay. And they say that if you're in a city, the time of the Shabbos in Avali Niachlai, if you're in the city, you can count from the edge of the city, outside the city. You don't have to count from the Eruv. That's because you're there, right? We're talking about a Ner Chareva. But Avali Niachlai, but if you only place the Eruv there, you're not actually there, then that won't apply. It's Kasha and Rebbe Lazar. Rebbe Lazar says it doesn't matter even if you place the Eruv there. You're still gonna count from outside the city. Where it says your whole assumption at the beginning was not accurate. You compared the city to the cave. Do it exactly the opposite, because you had two cases there. Do the cave similar to the city. Just like the city is settled, so too the cave is settled. Rabbi Akiva, and it's the opinion of Rabbi Akiva Damar. Usually, if you have put an Eruv, Rabbi Akiva holds you don't have from outside the city. You only have from the Eruv 2,000 amas. Rabbi Akiva's Maida ubeshavas. If you're settled there, if that's where you are, not where your food is, but you are yourself are actually there, Maidi. He agrees. So 1 second. Vakamar Tzidkiyo Ktani. What are you saying? It's a cave that people live there? He said it's a cave of Tzidkiyo. No one lives in that cave. No, it says Kamar Tzidkiyo, but like Kamar Tzidkiyo. It's a little bit like it, not totally like it. Kamar Tzidkiyo Gedayla. It's large. Like Kamar Tzidkiyo, the Elasam Chayvach Yeshiva. Here it's a cave that's settled. Okay. Mar Yehuda Shkichinu Lebnei Mevarchasa, the Kamoisvi Erevayu, Bebe Knishna, the Bei Aguvar. Okay. Mar Yehuda found the people of Berchasa that put their Erev in the shul of Bei Aguvar. Amalahu, he says, Gavu Batvei Keched Lishtir Luchutvei. Put it deep inside. I don't know if that means towards the edge of a different door or something or whatever. That way you'll have more area to walk. You'll be able to walk further because you start counting from the Erev. Amalu Rava Palga. This is like quarrelsome one. Okay, what side are you taking here? The Eiruvin less the Chashla Rabbi Kiva. You're following Rabbi Kiva's opinion that says you count from the Eiruv, but that's not so. The Chachamim say that you don't count from the Eiruv, you count from outside the city, which would be outside whatever the area is. It doesn't matter where in the house you put it, or where in this place you put it, it's always from the outside. Look, it's